beide schon da ist. Einmal ist Chantal Frei da, die sich nicht...
Welcome, dear viewers. Ritual abuse is a topic that we have often had at Bewusst TV, and both of my guests today have been here before. Chantal Frei is with us, who will not show her face simply because she does not wish to be recognized in public, but she will tell us a little bit more details than last time, even name names. And Dr. Marcel Polte, who is the author of many books and knows much about this subject, and may confirm what she says from other sources as well. Chantal, let me start with you. Since the last video I've read a lot of comments. Let me ask, did you have negative reactions, probably some by the very people who do not want such things in the public? What have you experienced?
Yes, as a matter of fact, since our last interview, which was, I believe, in January, I have experienced persecution up to this very day. And also people who were close to me, even those who lived together with me, were also threatened. Sometimes I even had to call the police, because there was really a threat around and inside the house. So yes, I have experienced quite a great deal of threat.
Marcel, you are following this and are also in contact with her. You talk to each other often. Did you also notice what happened after the last show with Chantal? What did you hear?
Selber habe ich es jetzt natürlich dann nicht miterlebt, was ich direkt sozusagen in ihrem Wohnumfeld... Yes, of course, she told me what was happening there. Of course, I didn't experience myself what happened directly in her living environment, but I had already spoken to people from her environment beforehand who were able to confirm many of the things she reported in your program, so that I gained a deeper insight, yes.
Erstmal frage ich mich natürlich, warum sollte irgendjemand...
I've been reading comments like, oh, she's not credible and she's only telling stories. First of all, I wonder myself why someone should make up something like that and basically admitting to have participated in quite nasty things. That is nothing to boast about, but do the comments perhaps come from people who do such things themselves and so would portray you as untrustworthy? Chantal, what is your impression?
Yes, I have read all the comments that I could read, and I can imagine that there are also perpetrators among them, or that there are people among them who want to ridicule the whole thing, and who are also interested in making a joke out of broadcasts like this one. What shall I say to that? If there are people who write that they don't believe it, or she seems strange to me, or I have a strange gut feeling, then they just have this strange gut feeling. What should I say to that? That does not stop me from continuing to go my way and to speak out, and this is exactly what I intend to do.
Some of the commentators say, why doesn't she mention any names? And it is so understandable for me, on the one hand, that you of course make yourself vulnerable. On the other hand, you have now decided, I think, that if you name the names, then there's no more reason to persecute or even kill you. In the worst case, there is the danger. So you really want to mention names today?
Yes, that's what I want to do today in this interview. I'm going to mention the names of these people, whom I also mention in the book, people I have described a little bit. Why am I doing this? It's really because of the last few weeks since the last interview, or rather it started a little bit before that. When the persecutions and even the threats started, I thought that they might still be trying to prevent me from going public with the names. by means of these threats. It was already known to some people. I mean, my book was published in December, and I've already talked about it publicly. But I haven't revealed the name so publicly yet. And I can imagine that this is one of the reasons for these threats, that they're trying to prevent me from doing that. And the second reason is that the more I go out in public, and the more people are informed, the more protection I also have.
Yes, that's exactly why we want to broadcast this interview. So you're going to reveal more, and that will be very exciting. Marcel, can you, as a writer, summarize the topic for the people who haven't heard of, let's say, ritual abuse, to have a starting point for the people who might be hearing about it for the first time?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. Perhaps briefly in the note again on the subject of names. It was Chantal's clear intention from the beginning to publish the names. They were even in a manuscript, so it was actually my fault, or due to my intervention, that the names didn't appear in the book, because I said, then your book becomes vulnerable too easily, and its publication could then immediately be stopped. But it was clear to her from the beginning that the names should come. She had merely left open the time and the way in which the names were to be disclosed. In this respect, it is not a new plan. Exactly. On the subject of ritual abuse, perhaps it is important to mention very briefly that it is always about family structures, which ultimately pass on a satanic agenda from generation to generation. In connection with this, one might say that abuse takes place from birth in the entire family. Very special mind control techniques are used, personality splits are worked with, and conditioning techniques are applied, ultimately with the goal of making one's own children into perpetrators later on, in order then to follow this very agenda over generations. By now, the whole thing has been very well substantiated, especially by the specialist literature of therapists. There's a lot of German, but also abroad, American specialist literature that describes in detail what happens in these cults. There are studies, for example, by the Independent Commission for Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse, a commission set up on the basis of a German Bundestag resolution, which has also taken a close look at the subject, so that it is now clear that this is no fantasy topic. What the survivors report is real, and in this respect it is also important that not only therapists exchange information among themselves professionally, but also, like Chantal Frei, survivors themselves share their insights.
Now it has just been the news that Megan Fox, an American actress, has said that she is consuming, she exchanges drops of blood with her fiancé as part of a ritual, and that sounds a bit, well, like Hollywood chic, but there's much more behind it, I assume, and you know it, Chantal. The striking thing is really that prominent people whom we think are famous, great actors, pop singers, politicians, maybe even church people, world-famous people, take part in such things. And let's perhaps unravel this bit by bit. Who were the first ones, or who was the first one you knew from TV or somewhere else? Or how do we start from here? You described a few scenes in the book. A pop singer from Austria, for example, or where do we start?
Exactly. So I brought this book with me, and I'll show it quickly to the camera. It's about this book, Ich rede, I speak out, that I have written, and I wrote that I have met prominent personalities, and I thought maybe I can just start with this. I describe one of the first things I experienced when I was very young. I was about 6 years old, and I was taken to the Château Amarois, which is in Belgium. It's also known as the Château Mother of Darkness. That was the place where the decision was made to make a so-called Mother of Darkness out of me, because I had passed one exam in their eyes, the so-called child hunt. And I wrote it down to not forget anybody, because I really want to mention all the names today. And I do not want to forget anybody I mentioned in the book. In this child hunt in Amarois, I mentioned Marie-Hélène Delacroix. That's the pseudonym I gave for this woman, but actually it's Princess Stephanie Windisch-Graetz. She is now deceased, but this is a woman who was very, very deeply involved in these satanic rituals. I don't know what kind of position she had, but she participated, and she was the one who actually decided what to make of me, that is, what level I should reach. Besides her, there was also Princess Liliane, who is also a princess from Belgium, and a woman who always hosted me when I was brought there the next time. Yes, the word hosted sounds so positive, but that was how it was. And then she also taught me about the rituals. Yes.
Marcel, du kennst es ja auch, diese Geschichten, vielleicht kannst du es nochmal sagen.
So this manhunt was your first experience, so to speak, and Marcel, you also know these stories, and you, Chantal, can also tell it again from your experience, but can we get a picture of it? There's a castle, there's a huge area that's closed off, and where you say that there are simply no people walking through the park, or do they? You described it in the book. The kids are trying to run and they try to hunt them down and finally to kill them.
Yes, so hunts are a kind of selection ritual that's actually reported again and again in the literature. Kathy O'Brien reported this in her book many, many years ago, which I think was called The Most Dangerous Game, where it was organized that she and her daughter, among others, were hunted, this case in a closed military area, but I've also heard from other survivors that they had to participate in these hunts in childhood simply to find out from the point of view of the perpetrators which of the children is the most intelligent, the most resilient, and ultimately, because of its abilities, suitable to carry on these functions in the cult. And important here, perhaps again, are the links, since Chantal mentions the princess Stephanie Windisch-Graetz. It is perhaps interesting to know that this name also appears in connections with the Dutroux case. There's a book called Les Dossiers X, the X dossier, by a trio of investigative journalists who went very deep into this case of Dutroux. They also mention the names, especially of another nobleman whose name I have to look up again quickly. This is the Count Jan de Meaux d'Argenteuil, who published a list in 1999 of which he said, these are the names of people who are involved in child abuse and child trafficking. The name also appears there. And this person, this princess, was actually the great-granddaughter of Emperor Franz Joseph and Empress Elizabeth, the so-called Sissi of Austria. So it is indeed a connection to the absolute high nobility that she represents.
Now, what we think royalty stands for in Austria, like Sissi, France, so beautiful and everything, so romantic, and that has nothing to do with reality, or not much. Chantal, from your point of view, is this common practice in the royal families, or is it so rare that the other royals would think it's going out of hand? or is it so common that they all do that?
Well, I can really only speak from my own experience. And I have also heard or read about other people involved. I mean, that's clear. So I can't say if everyone is involved, but in any case, I think very many are. I experienced it myself in the Amarok Castle with its Princess Windischgrätz.
In England, und zwar, weil ich die Queen getroffen habe.
And I also experienced it in England because I met the Queen. Well, I met her in the context of rituals, in the context of tortures. And I also report about this in my book, in which I describe her as a well-dressed, fine lady with good clothes. At that time, when I made these experiences with her, she was, of course, younger. And in relation with her, as I also describe in the book, I was more or less picked up to experiences called a so-called butterfly program. That was what I was told to do. So the Queen told me I was her butterfly child, and I was now being picked up for a butterfly program, so to speak. She also encouraged me and told me, well, in order to be a butterfly, you must pass certain exams. And she wanted to give me confidence and told me that I was a strong child and would surely be a good butterfly, and that I should certainly pass this exam. And the one thing that I also describe in the book is that I experienced torture and was stretched apart with my legs and arms, and they actually made me look like a butterfly. That was simply one method of torture. And that is an incident I describe with the Queen. I met her several times.
Let's stay with the situation for a moment. I mean, we are imagining now that the Queen is standing around in fancy royal clothes and she's standing next to a table like this, a rack, where you are. Are you naked or dressed?
Yes. Yes, I was naked.
So you were fixed in a painful position and, well, of course, it is terrible for you to go into that situation. I don't want you to go too deep into it now, because some commentators have said she is not emotionally touched when she talks about it, but of course we don't want to go so far that you can't stand it either. But as I said, to imagine that the Queen is present at something like that, at something horrific like that, and then encourages you saying, if you get through this well, then you are my butterfly, is simply absurd.
This is the first time I've heard this kind of torture in connection with the butterfly programming. You describe it very similar to Katie Groves, for example, an MK Ultra survivor from the USA, who was also introduced to this monarch program through her family and who describes it in the same way through her videos. The perpetrators portrayed it to her the same way: you are an ugly, useless caterpillar, and through the programming, through your participation in the program, you will blossom into a butterfly, which is then important and has tasks to fulfill. So that's a very similar rationale that she provides there. And on the subject of the Queen, it is possible, even if many people say it's actually inconceivable, that someone like that would be involved in something like this. I mean, I myself can only say what the CIA would say. I can neither confirm nor deny that. But for example, Arizona Wilder, also an MK Ultra survivor, also names the Queen as a perpetrator. And during the research for my new book, I came across a very interesting source. Last year it came out that in the Canadian residential schools, much abuse was practiced, especially on the indigenous people of Canada, and graves were also discovered.
Hundreds, yes.
Hundreds, exactly. so that the statements of the Aboriginals, which have been made for decades, that there's killing and abuse, have been confirmed in the last year. And I came across a statement by an Aboriginal man named William Coombs from Vancouver, who describes a very interesting incident. I will read an official statement he gave to Protocol, an incident in which Queen Elizabeth plays a role. And he has recorded here, I quote, "In September 1964, when I was 12 years old, I was an inmate at the Kamloops School and we were visited by the Queen of England and Prince Philip. I remember it was strange because they came by themselves, no big fanfare or nothing. But I recognized them and the school principal told us it was the Queen and we all got given new clothes and good food for the first time in months the day before she arrived." To this we must say the Queen of England is also the head of state of Canada. Many people don't know that. And then he writes further, "The day she got to the school, I was part of a group of kids that went on a picnic with the Queen and her husband and school officials down to a meadow near Deadman's Creek. After a while, I saw the Queen leave the picnic, 10 children from the school, and those children never returned. We never heard anything more about them and never saw them again, even when we were older. They were all from around there, but they all vanished. The group that disappeared was 7 boys and 3 girls in age from 6 to 14 years old." And of course you can ask yourself, does it make sense that he should think up something like that and suspect the Queen personally?
Yes, of course you would expect that people get sued. There are witnesses like Casey O'Brien and Arizona Wilder who talk about presidents and so on and rituals. And if they were lying, they would be sued to the full extent. But this never happens because then even more would probably come to light. Chantal, now let's carry on. You have more names. One was from when you were 6 years old there in the castle, but you have talked about another large ritual.
Yes, exactly.
How does it continue?
One ritual, one of the worst rituals I had to experience, was when I was 16 years old. I also describe that in my book. It took place in Barcelona in the Sagrada Familia and was actually the completion, so to speak, of what began when I was in the Amarois castle, when it was determined that I should reach this stage, the Mother of Darkness. And that was the finalization and the celebration that took place. This was a celebration for these people. There were very, very many prominent people who came, and some of them I recognized. And today I know who they are. There were also other people who I do not know or am not quite certain who they are, but I really only want to mention those whom I can identify with certainty and know that they were present. I'm talking about a well-known man, as you mentioned earlier, an Austrian singer who was in charge of the whole thing. I call him Paul Heinrich in my book, and it was actually Peter Alexander.
So you are saying he was in charge of this ritual as a master of ceremonies, or how do you call it? So he was in charge. He is known from his shows where he sings about love and romance, but you've seen him as the head of it. So what did he do there? Can you tell about the ritual? The Sagrada Familia is a big cathedral, so it was closed. Did this take place during the day or the night?
Yes, of course, it was closed. It took place at nighttime. I don't know what it looked like outside because I was inside, but I assume that it was closed because it was a private party.
But not in the cellar or somewhere, in the main part.
Yes, that took place in the main part of this church. And yes, you asked how he handled this. Well, he behaved basically as one knows him. The way he also behaved in moderating things, exactly the same way he's well known for. That's how you can imagine it. And he also instructed me. He guided me and told me what to do. And when I could not do it, he took my hand and guided me to perform, to do what was required of me.
Describe the ritual. You described it in the book, and you both had a certain function. If I remember correctly, it's about a satanic wedding, isn't it?
Right. So he actually played the role of Satan. And this ritual was actually for me to be married to Satan, and that's how it was actually played. Yes. Played is, I can't find any other words for it.
How are they dressed then? In capes, robes, or casually, or in suits? I have no idea at all how to picture something like that.
Well, at this ritual in the Sagrada, some certain people were dressed in robes. Some of them also had different colors, and some had hoods. And there were also very many people who were dressed in festive clothing, as if they were attending a wedding. So it was quite mixed at this ritual. Other rituals take place in a different way, depending on the type of ritual. Some may also have different clothes on or not. Some people might just be naked or just wear hoods over their heads.
So it's like a big celebration, but combined with such perverted sexual and bloody elements. Do they then look forward eagerly to that kind of cruel thing happening? It is so completely incomprehensible.
Please tell me again what happened to the woman who was brought in.
Yes, exactly. That's what I described. The purpose was that a woman in an advanced stage of pregnancy had to be sacrificed on this day for the honor of Satan, of course, and she was then brought in by two men, by two persons, I can't say men, by two persons whom I didn't recognize, and then laid on this altar, and then I had to kill this woman and this child.
With a knife. A ritual knife, right? Now you said you saw more people at this ritual. Peter Alexander as maître d', I would say.
Exactly. Then the marriage took place with him, so to speak. With him I had to eat the so-called wedding feast, and that was blood and also human flesh. This is also part of the ritual. Then I met several more people, and I just want to read their names out loud and then explain briefly why I know exactly who these people are. I met the current King Philip there. At that time, of course, he was still a prince. He's about my age. Then there was a famous sportsman, Serge Blanco. Then Gérard Depardieu.
Yes, the actor.
Yes, exactly, the actor. And then there were these three well-known tenors. Well, at that time they weren't yet known as three tenors. There was Placido Domingo, Luciano Pavarotti, and José Carrera.
All the three of them.
Yes, all three of them were there together.
Did they perform, so to speak?
No, so I don't remember a joint performance of those three.
But you said they were all three tenors, not yet established, so to speak, but they have been there at the ritual.
Exactly, exactly. So they were up on the stage, so they also played a very major role in this whole ritual. So there was a stage with an altar. Of course, it is still all there. And then there are a few stairs going down, and there is a big hall.
Was there music?
There was music. I remember music. And also that songs were sung. And maybe these men sang there, but I can't say that for sure, whether it was them or others. I don't remember that. Then there was another French actress, Catherine Deneuve, and then another actress, and as I have learned from the internet, she was not so well known at that time. That's Elisabeth Shue, how you pronounce it.
That doesn't ring a bell, but then I'm no expert in French actresses.
No, Elisabeth Shue is American.
I don't know some of the names.
And then Meg Cabot was also there, who later became and is today a very, very well-known author, who also writes film productions, as far as I know. I informed myself on the internet. And then there was a woman called Anna Komorowska, who is the wife of a later president in Poland, who was president in Poland from 2010 to 2015. Bronislaw Komorowski is his name. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. But she was there. I don't remember him, but that doesn't mean he wasn't there. I just don't know. And then Lady Diana was there. Yes, and however, and I want to emphasize this, because I really saw and noticed that she was under the guard and the control of Mohammed Al-Fayed, that is the father of her later partner. What was his name again?
Dodi.
Dodi, that's right. Dodi's father, so she was under his control.
Did you have the impression that she didn't like it, or that she didn't want to be there, or that she was forced to be there?
I had the impression, and this is my personal opinion, that she was actually forced to be there, and she was actually also guarded by this Mohammed Al-Fayed.
Yes, that's what some people say, that Lady Di got into these royal circles, so to speak, and then experienced such things, horrible things, and then she tried to talk about it somehow. David Icke has talked about it, that she talked about the lizards, made insinuations, and, or her death, that she was ritually sacrificed. You know that too, right? So this accident in the tunnel at the 13th column was not an accident. I heard it took very long till the doctor came. They were alone for a long time. I mean, in Paris, an ambulance ought to have been there in 5 minutes, right? But I think it took half an hour or so. I don't remember. You know that, and it might very well be that she was eliminated because she wanted to free herself from it, or was not so completely happy with it as the others. Okay, that was that one ritual, or was there someone else that you had on that list?
No, so these are the people I recognized at this ritual in the Sagrada. Just as I said, there were more people there, but I only want to mention those whom I definitely recognized and state what I really know.
We also see celebrities from Hollywood, and in your book, in the last video, I indicated that an actor who does all of his daring stunts, and we didn't mention the name, but I know you know, who is that, and what did you experience with him?
Yes, exactly. Now I just realized, looking at my list, sorry, I forgot to mention that Tony Blair was also in the Sagrada. I saw him there as well, exactly.
Okay, Tony Blair. So what would be next?
No, he was a spectator. So afterwards there was a party with an orgy and everything. So I was raped there several times. And yes, afterwards there was a party with music and everything. And then I saw and met these people. Yes, what you said before of this well-known actor whom you have just mentioned, you have also read the book. I call him John Collett in my book, and that is actually Tom Cruise. And I described an incident in my book when I met him, also in the Amoroi Castle, and I was led there and was actually his birthday present. And I was delivered to him in a kind of bird cage. Well, it had the shape of a bird cage. And a ritual also took place there, in which I was then forced to kill adult men. Yes, that was actually also like a show, like these well-known shows in the south of France.
That doesn't ring a bell. What kind of show?
Avec les taureaux. Yes, well, with bulls, you know. Instead of bullfights, it's fighting against humans.
And then also with spears?
No, with knives, with a knife.
And also slow and cruel, right?
It's a fight. People fighting against each other, and that's what I had to do.
What did you have to do?
Fight against men. There I had to fight, yes, exactly. And I guess that one of them, I guess, also died. So that's my guess, and the last picture I have in mind of this man. And there were some people standing around us, and they applauded and encouraged us, and so on.
Is that really a fight for you? So they might just as well have killed you? Or was it a role play for you, that you should kill them?
I think that I was supposed to kill them because I was, well, a part of me, a part of my personality was trained and taught to kill. And I assume that these men were not trained to do that. And they were actually there to be sacrificed.
And Tom Cruise is standing somewhere, or is he hosting this?
No, he's standing somewhere. This happened on one of his birthdays, and that was his birthday present.
And does he enjoy it there?
He does, he enjoys it.
Okay, so that's a celebration where I ask myself, how can anybody have fun with that? But that is just common in these circles, and you've probably participated in many such holiday celebrations, right?
Yes.
Basically, I once had a ritual calendar, and the holidays that we have as Christian holidays are also used in such circles as satanic rituals, or did you know that?
Yes.
So when we celebrate Easter or Good Friday or whatever,
It's actually a reversal of the meanings of the Christian holidays for these satanic purposes. For example, in Dr. Alison Miller's expert book on mind control therapy, one finds at the back a complete catalogue of such holidays throughout the whole year. And what happened in the Sagrada Familia in Barcelona was also on a certain day, right?
Da feiert man auch den Geburtstag von Satan.
That was actually the day on which Satan's birthday is celebrated.
April 30th, okay. So that's an established holiday there. Good. Oh, not so good. So, as I said, if one goes in there, cruel things happen. But it's just very common in these circles, and they celebrate it regularly somehow, and they have fun with cruel things happening, sex, blood, and horror. It all belongs together, does it not?
Yes, it always goes together, yes.
Good. You've got a long list of names there, or at least a few more. Now I don't even know how to go on, but you said in the last show that you have been in the White House. You described it in the book. Were there rituals, or did you just participate in events?
I took part in events there. I also had a room that was assigned to me, which was called the Blue Room. But strangely enough, it was not decorated that much in blue, but more in red, so that was actually a total confusion. But they called it the Blue Room, that was what they told me. And at that time, there was also an incident in which I met a president. And I also experienced the yellow program, or the yellow trigger, which had to do with punishment. And then I was also punished for something, and that was Jimmy Carter. And the woman who had then actually dressed me to meet this president was Margaret Thatcher.
Okay. Marcel, you have knowledge of other books and literature, of course. Can you confirm that presidents, I mean, Casey O'Brien has publicly named presidents, right?
Yes, she's a witness that mentions many names. From more recently, there's a survivor by the name of Ellie Carter, who was abused for rituals, who also states that she had contact with several presidents there. And then, if you look again, you find more hints. The court documents were unsealed on August 9, 2019 in the Epstein case, in which Virginia Roberts-Gifford testified. And I'm just quoting here what she's saying right there with regard to being forced to have sex. And now, here's the quote. With many other powerful men, including numerous prominent American politicians, powerful CEOs, foreign presidents, other prime ministers, and other world leaders. End quote. That means in this context, which however has nothing to do with rituals as far as we know, these very same groups of perpetrators are named. And what is also interesting, this unsealing of the documents took place on August 9, and on August 10, 2019, the next day, Epstein was found dead in his cell. So that one can only ask oneself, is one event possibly related to the other event?
Yes, it's interesting that these court hearings are not made public. And now we have Johnny Depp and what's the actress's name? There are hours of broadcasts from the courtroom. Everything he says, everything she says, everything the judge says, it's all public. But in a case like this, they say it's not public. So the question is, why is something like that protected? Chantal, is that also your impression? Is it just protected because up at the top everyone is involved and nobody wants anything to be revealed?
That is my impression, yes. because there is already quite a bit of information about this, some of the names I mentioned, and then I noticed, oh, I'm not the first who has such memories of these people. So yes, some of these people and things have already been talked about before I began talking about it. And what has happened since then? Nothing, and that cannot be. This can only be possible precisely because all of this is protected.
So everything in the system, I mean police, judiciary, media, of course politicians, so they control all these powers in all areas. And then there are the media, for me an important role. Everything is controlled. All of them keep together. There was a video on German TV, a documentary called Hell Life, and Sandra Rasch was in it, and she was also here once. That is one of the very rare events that the media report about satanic rituals. Chantal, do you have anyone on your list of names that you haven't mentioned yet? Of course, I don't know who else you would like to name.
Yes, so I still have two names of people who are also mentioned in my book. And these names are Bill Clinton and also his wife Hillary Clinton. And I met Bill Clinton, as I describe in my book, in a house that looked to me like a country-style house. So I was there, I was very young, 4 or 5 years old, and I was then ordered to serve other people who were guests of Bill Clinton or simply who were invited there sexually. I was told that we are playing a restaurant game, so to speak, and they were allowed to choose something from the menu, and I was the one who had to serve this dish as a little girl. And all of this happened with Bill Clinton. He told me his name too, just like that. So there was no secret, not at all.
So it's like a parallel world, so to speak, where they do things like that. And of course they have to be careful that nothing comes out in public. Bill Clinton then stumbled over the Lewinsky affair. I never had sex with that woman. And if you analyze the body language, etc., then of course you know that this is not just a bold-faced lie, but that they are doing completely different things than just an intern's blowjob. That's nothing compared to what's really happening.
Yes, Kathy O'Brien also names him. And what also was very interesting is that Chantal Frei in her book talks about a country-style house. And I couldn't really imagine it either. And then by chance, she saw the photo that recently went through the press, where Epstein and his accomplice are sitting in front of a log cabin. And this log cabin was in Balmoral in Scotland, and that is the Queen's summer residence. And when you, Chantal, saw this picture, then you also noticed that this was exactly such a house as where you saw Bill Clinton. So a country-style house was actually meant to be a log cabin. And then, if you do a little research, Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had been to this log house in 1999 at Prince Andrew's invitation, and in the media one finds articles that also describe this cabin, interestingly enough, as a hunting lodge, where hunting events take place, where guests are invited to lunch and meet there, and Balmoral Castle is also named again by Arizona Wilder as a crime scene. And furthermore, at least years later, Bill Clinton was actually in Balmoral. One can research that he stayed there in a hotel. The official reason was that he was giving a speech at the Economic Forum in Edinburgh, but one can ask oneself, of course, because he was in Balmoral years later, was this the first time, or what had brought him to this small place in particular? So there's at least the theory that this country-style house where she met Bill Clinton was this log cabin.
I've seen the pictures and someone compared both pictures, and in one you see Epstein and you just have a log cabin and they're sitting there somehow on a porch, and there's a similar picture where the Queen is also sitting there, and you can see from the details, the windows, the logs and so on, that it's the same location. And you mentioned the Queen several times.
Die ich eben erwähnt hatte, die jetzt letztes Jahr dann in die Öffentlichkeit gegangen ist, sie spricht auch in einem Interview davon, dass sie also Ellie Carter, who I just mentioned and who then went public last year, also talks in an interview about the fact that she had to fill orders at Buckingham Palace. She always speaks of orders, meaning that she was then there as a prostitute, so to speak.
Yes, there was once a very strange scene where someone filmed a naked man climbed out of the window of Buckingham Palace.
Yes,
One
a
doesn't
young
even
man
know
or boy.
if he survived. Then one also wonders what's going on behind the walls. It's not all royal. And you must have lost all illusions about the highest circles, Chantal. Or what do you think today about high-ranking personalities, celebrities?
Let's put it this way. I prefer to have to do with non-celebrities.
Understandable.
Well, I have lost the trust in them. I don't have it anymore. But I also want to believe that, well, I hope that not everyone has to deal with this kind of thing.
Yes, I also think, as you say, Lady Di was there and maybe she didn't like it. And I can also imagine that many people in these circles are even forced to participate because otherwise they might be harassed or treated in a way if they would spill the beans. And maybe someone dies from time to time. So you're under a certain amount of pressure. I also heard somewhere, or perhaps read it from one of the American authors, actually, some hope that all of these things come to light, so it would stop, because not every one of them likes what's going on, but, well, we don't know. The hope is for you and many others to contribute to bring these things into the light, and we are living in a time in which many things come to the surface. This is a special quality of time.
That's the positive thing, yes.
So I think it's so important that people like you speak out, because actually you could not remember anything in the first place, and you would not be able to speak about it because you had the programming to not remember. Normally you forget everything that happens in such rituals, right? And then you have programs that if you tell someone, you will be punished, you suffer pain, or you even die, right? There are a great many protective mechanisms to prevent you from actually being here and talk, right?
Exactly. So certain programs have already also started. So at the very beginning, when I said the first sentences, the suicide programs were triggered. And I tried to do that. And punishment programs too, self-punishment programs, but also programs from outside. So it is true that it's really very, very difficult to get out of it.
That's why we give you a lot of credit and are very grateful for these insights, which are not pretty. Marcel, can you once again perhaps conclude? Does this happen very rarely? Or can you say that masses of children disappear and are probably needed in rituals somewhere? Well, a shitty term, but what's your take on it? Is it such a marginal phenomenon, or must one say it happens all the time? Children disappear all the time, terrible things are done all the time. That's how I see it, that it's happening all the time all over the world.
In the specialist literature, therapists actually talk about disposable children. These are children who are also often born in the cults by so-called breeders, who only ever have the task of providing, so to speak, human offspring, which is then also available not only for the rituals themselves, but in the context of these rituals to train other children to become perpetrators themselves. And it is indeed to be assumed a widespread phenomenon. There was even in Germany, 2005 and 2007, a data collection with contract therapists. There, only in a small area of Germany, Saarland, Rhineland-Palatinate, nationwide counseling centers, and somewhere else, a small corner of Germany, where this was carried out, alone there were 102 cases of ritual abuse classified as credible, with 42 reported homicides. And if you think about it, on the one hand, this survey was really geographically very, very limited. On the other hand, we have to assume a very large number of unreported cases.
It's never going to come into light that way. The bodies are buried there somewhere. I mean, that's also the next thing. The whole thing works in such a way that the corpses are then cremated somewhere in the oven with other ones or whatever. Also, human meat processing, right? There's always talk about human meat that is found somewhere in meat processing plants. Is that normal for them to eat human flesh and drink blood?
I have experienced this in the context of rituals. It's like with celebrations. It's not like that you just sit down at the table and then eat this meat. That may also happen. I have heard that from others. I myself don't know if I have eaten human meat at the table, but I know that I had to take it as Christians take communion, in which they also speak of the body of Christ and of the blood of Christ. Then one actually drinks the blood and consumes the body, if possible, of innocent people.
For me, the Christian ritual alone has always been very questionable, because this idea of drinking blood and eating meat and seeing that as something sacred, there's already a lot of distortion in religions. Do you also see it that way, that the Catholic churches, the Vatican in particular, also have twists in them?
It can be assumed. We all know certain indications, for example, the audience hall of the Pope, which is shaped like a snake from the outside and the inside, where one must ask oneself, how can that be if the snake is mentioned as a symbol of the devil in the Bible and other suspicious things. Thus, insofar, it must be assumed that religions are indeed infiltrated. Another example, the extreme abuse that is taking place in the Catholic Church. I've also heard from survivors who have told me that they were abused by nuns as well, for example. So, in this respect, there is certainly this satanic infiltration.
Yes, I mean, just the abuse in Catholic circles is just always covered somehow, and one really wonders what is going on there. But we don't want to take it too far. Chantal, the main point was that you have told about your experiences, and for that, first of all, thank you. Chapeau. It's basically also a protection for you now, because that they should try to prevent you from speaking out would no longer serve any purpose.
Right. Now it's out.
Do you have anything to say in conclusion? What is your message?
Yes, well, I think what we are doing here, yes, us together here, and also the others who are talking about it and also have the courage to report about it, we are really doing pioneer work, and that is absolutely worthwhile. I am firmly convinced of that. And I hope, and I also believe, that we will be at a different point in 5 or 10 years, and that those affected will be heard much better in 10 years than they are today, especially here in Europe. In America, things still look a bit different, but especially here in Europe or in German-speaking countries, yes. Therefore, I am also quite grateful for this program, and thank you, Joe, for giving me this platform to speak.
Thank you. Because, as I said, I know these things only from hearsay. I think I have an inner distinction. Whom do I invite for an interview? Who is real and honest or what? So, for my part, of course, I always have such inner feelings about people. And this topic, either they're all crazy or there's really something to it. I also talked to Jesse Marson and Sandra Rush and also you and others about it. And when they told me privately what they experienced, sometimes I say, stop it, it is too horrible, I don't want to know everything. I believe that more and more people today are spreading this word, even though someone is always trying to suppress it. People try to control the social media somehow and delete something like that as hate speech or something. But it doesn't work out anymore, and more people are aware of these structures, these dark secret powers. After all, it's also about power. I mean, I think all the power structures that we have in the world have to do with it, with the abuse of children. So basically they are partners in crime, so no one betrays the other, but many more people than 5 or 10 years ago, I think, are now aware that they suspect what's going on, and at some point, hopefully, there will be an end to it. We need the police and the judiciary, the politicians, the media, and demand. That is unacceptable. Thank you both very much for the work you do, Marcel, also for the books. You also contribute a great deal, and I hope, as you say, that in a few years or maybe sooner we may make another interview and say, look, this has happened since then, and these things are coming to light and are no longer tolerated by humanity. Thank you very much, Chantal Frei and Marcel Polte.